Hey guys, it's Sandeep from Drive Atlas and welcome to the camera comparison between the Realme XT and the Redmi Note 7 Pro. Now we know that the Note 8 Pro is just around the corner, but many of you requested for this video as I think many of you are planning to upgrade to the XT in case it turns out to be a better camera phone than the Redmi Note 7 Pro. Now to be fair, like we showed in our previous video, megapixels aren't everything. So there's a good chance that the Note 7 Pro could still be better in terms of the image quality, sharpness, etc. So we'll know for sure in this camera comparison. So before we get started, please do make sure to hit the subscribe button, and also if you end up enjoying the video, please do hit the like button as well. Now let's get started. The Realme XT has a 64 megapixel 1x1.72 inch Samsung GW1 sensor with f1.8 aperture and 0.8 micron pixel size. It also has three other camera sensors in the form of a secondary ultra-wide angle 8 megapixel f2.2 camera with 1/4 inch sensor size and 1.12 micron pixel size. You also get a 2 megapixel macro camera and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. The Redmi Note 7 Pro has a half inch 48 megapixel Sony IMX586 sensor along with a 5 megapixel f2.4 depth sensor. It has f1.79 aperture and 0.8 micron pixel size. Both the phones capture good photos in well lit conditions and have great dynamic range as well. We recommend leaving the HDR mode on for both always to get the best effect. In terms of dynamic range, they are practically identical, but they deal a bit differently in terms of shadows particularly. In some scenes, you see the Note 7 Pro having higher contrast and darker shadows, while in other scenes it's the XT that does so. What remains constant is the more saturated photos from the XT, while the Note 7 Pro in comparison is more natural and as a result easier to tweak with in post-processing too. You can easily increase the saturation but not always reduce it without getting the photo weird. In terms of file sizes, the Pixel Bin 12 megapixel photos from the Note 7 Pro are always larger in file size compared to 16 megapixel photos from the XT. That generally should mean more detailing on the Note 7 Pro photos, but in fact it has more to do with Realme being able to process the files well and restrict the file size without losing much information, as the details and sharpness are still higher on the XT. The Note 7 Pro captures 12 megapixel resolution photos with pixel binning, but you can also capture in 48 megapixels. The XT in comparison shoots 16 megapixel pixel bin photos by default, and you can capture in 64 megapixels if you want. The file sizes are around 3 to 4 times larger on the XT if you offer 64 megapixel photos, and they are similarly around 3 times larger on the Note 7 Pro as well. Here are some samples of the full resolution 48 and 64 megapixel photos side by side. We also did a blind test to see which one wins, and phone A on the left was Realme XT, while phone B on the right was Note 7 Pro. As we noted earlier, XT oversaturated the frame, but in details and sharpness, there is no contest. This brings us to a low light comparison as well. The larger sensor on the XT, which is around 16% larger, means that it can capture more light at any given moment compared to a Note 7 Pro, and this makes a difference in low light conditions. The XT doesn't require as high an ISO level, nor as long as a shutter speed as the Note 7 Pro to achieve a similarly exposed frame. As a result, noise is lower and sharpness and detail are also higher. You can see how the ISO is kept much lower on the XT despite practically having the same shutter speed as the Note 7 Pro. Of course, in order to take full advantage of the low light capabilities, you need to use the night mode on Note 7 Pro and nightscape mode on the XT. Doing so will reduce the resolution of the XT photos to 11 to 12 megapixels, and it crops in a little into a frame, while it still remains 12 megapixel on the Note 7 Pro. Both the phones get better with this as there is lesser noise, better sharpness and detail, and some clarity also added to the mix. However, the XT photo is still better in terms of getting a cleaner output, but the bad part is the extremely saturated photos. Of course, both the phones can also shoot in Pro mode, where you can keep it at base ISO of 100 and take clean photos with a long exposure. Phones were rested against a railing here for this, and here are the results. The XT was shot at 16 long exposure, while the Note 7 Pro was with a 32-second long exposure. The XT can't take any long exposures as 16 seconds is max, but the fact that the overall exposure is right and almost identical to a Note 7 Pro despite half the exposure time shows the benefits of the larger sensor letting in more light. The nightscape and night modes can also be used in daylight conditions to improve the dynamic range further, but nightscape mode is less dramatic and not as aggressive in terms of processing compared to a Note 7 Pro mode in such situations. The Realme XT also has an ultra wide angle camera that can help capture more dramatic looking photos, which is something that the Note 7 Pro can't do. The quality is lesser than the primary camera, but the different focal length makes it more versatile and fun to play with. In terms of portrait mode is polarizing because while the Note 7 Pro takes a more detailed image with better sharpness on the portion of focus, the dynamic range is poor, and in some situations you get blown out highlights such as this. The XT on the other hand has better dynamic range but poorer sharpness and detail as the blur bleeds onto the portion in focus. The Realme XT has a 16 megapixel f2 front camera, while the Note 7 Pro gives you a 13 megapixel front camera. Images are better from the XT front camera as they have better sharpness and detail as well as lesser chances of shake. The Note 7 Pro appears to be good, but zooming in and comparing will show the differences. The dynamic range is also better on the XT and most of you voted for the same in our blind test. The Note 7 Pro in this case has a very warm look too, which is wrong. Portrait mode is again slightly better on the Note 7 Pro, just like the rear camera with better sharpness, unlike the XT which has some blur bleeding onto the face. Both the phones support up to 4K 30fps without EIS and 1080p 30fps with EIS. There's also an additional 60fps 1080p mode without EIS on both. Video quality is about the same on both, and I personally would use them with EIS only, as otherwise it's too shaky. The difference is mainly in terms of color, where the XT is more saturated and sometimes shifts color between video as well. It also has the problem of dropping frames in 60fps mode, so Note 7 Pro is my pick here. But in terms of front-facing camera videos, XT is clearly ahead thanks to EIS, which is not present on the Note 7 Pro, and the Note 7 Pro also has inferior quality in terms of audio. This is the front-facing camera of the Realme XT, capturing 1080p 30fps video. Let me know what you guys think about the overall sharpness, the dynamic range, the stabilization, and how well it's picking up my voice in this particular scenario. This is the front-facing camera of the Redmi Note 7 Pro, capturing 1080p 30fps video. Let me know what you guys think about the overall sharpness, the dynamic range, the stabilization, and how well it's picking up my voice as well. So that was the camera comparison between the Note 7 Pro and the Realme XT. So in all fairness, the Note 7 Pro did put up a fair fight, but the Realme XT won at the end of the day. The XT has better low light imaging, better detail and sharpness during the daytime shots. It has better front facing video and pretty good overall video with the back camera also, and not to mention the fact that it has an ultra wide angle camera that gives you more dramatic field of view. Now the Note 7 Pro has better video with the rear camera. It also has better portrait mode thanks to better sharpness and detail, and also better position and focus where there's no blur bleeding. But at the end of the day, overall as a smartphone in terms of cameras, between these two I think the XT still wins it. Now to be fair, the Note 7 Pro came quite some time back, and now it'll be more apt or more fair to compare it with the Note 8 Pro, but since many of you asked for this, we brought this video out. Now it'll be really interesting to see just how the Note 8 Pro compares to a Realme XT, and considering that the Note 7 Pro itself was so close to the XT in terms of overall performance, I have a feeling that it could edge out the XT as well. But it'll be interesting to see, and we'll be bringing that to you very soon as well once the Note 8 Pro launches in India. Thanks for watching this video. See you again in the next one.